Retention doesn't have to mean right now until forever. It could mean leaving the door open for them to come back.
I had the worst experience of my career in terms of like leadership and culture.
You worked at the store and now you're going to college because you want to be an accountant or a lawyer or work in marketing. I've never seen very obvious paths being drawn to tell those people, you can do that here. And because you've worked in the store, you're especially valuable to us.
I think that some companies don't really want someone who's worked in the store to be in those spaces where they could tell people what really goes on in a store. I think some companies don't want to know.
A question to kick us off, as always. Are exits a missed opportunity in retail? So an employee leaving, whoever that employee is, how they leave, are retailers missing an opportunity to show up in some way?
Yeah, for sure. And I think in like several layers. So one really simple layer as a customer, right? Like employees, I will die on this hill. Retail employees often apply to places that they are customers or where they like the product or the service or whatever. And you risk losing a customer, but also risk losing more customers, because if it's a bad exit experience, I imagine they're going to friends and family and they're like, can you believe the way they treated me after my X years of service? I also think it's a missed opportunity because I think HR exit interviews are done some places, not others. I don't really know what happens to that information. And I think regardless of how long you've been somewhere or why you left, all of those answers are shaded with the like, well, they left. So like, why do we care what they think?
Yes.
Which is wild to me. And I also think, hot take, that people with shorter tenures, their opinions are taken less because they're like, well, they didn't even stick around. And I think that's actually an opportunity to dig in, because if you've been somewhere for 8 years and then you leave, it might not be that there was a final straw. It might just be that like, it was your time. It was the next career move. That actually doesn't need an exit interview. There's another opportunity for you and you're taking it. I would actually argue, and I feel this way as a store manager with hourly employees, when I see a person who's had really short tenure, like 6 months here, 9 months there, and it's very common now, especially for hourly like associates. A lot of people view that as a red flag. I'm going to say my ego actually is like, well, they're going to stick around for me because they haven't met Matt yet. And I would say 9 times out of 10, I like prove that to be true, because when I dig into why they have such short tenure, once they start for me and I get to know them as a person, I find that it was the silliest things that, and a lot of people don't like younger people for this. This is where I do love them for this, which is they just have zero tolerance for not being treated well. So they're like, oh, you don't know how to not schedule me during class? Bye. Oh, you can't give me that Saturday off? Okay, bye. You talk to me in a way that makes me feel disrespected? Okay, bye. And so because I know I'm not going to do any of those things, a lot of times when I have hired those people, they've actually like stuck around for me. And why I'm saying all this, to get back to your original question, is it's a missed opportunity because I think someone leaving after 4 months should be the biggest red alert. Like, they went through all of the interviews, they did the onboarding, they did the training. I don't care how much of a job hopper you are, leaving somewhere, throwing your life into chaos, going through the application process, going through the interview process, starting a new job. No one like loves to do that. That's like no one's like, yes, this is what makes me really happy. So I think that's an opportunity to dig in and be like, so you've been here for 4 months. How could we have pissed you off so bad in 4 months that you're already leaving? So yeah, I think it's a huge missed opportunity to learn about the company's leadership, about their values and how they're showing up. I mean, they could learn so many things. They just have to take their own ego out of it.
Yeah, 100% agree. If someone is leaving in like 3 months, sometimes less, right? Like than like 3 months, I feel like what they must be thinking is, I made a mistake. I made a mistake taking this job. And so it is an opportunity, absolutely, to get curious about why. Were we unclear about what this role was going to be like in the day to day in our job at, right? Was there a mismatch of expectations? Was the onboarding terrible? Is the day to day terrible? Like, how on earth did, to your point, this person go through this whole process and then immediately decide to leave? Close to immediately. The one thing, though, I kind of want to bring into the fold this idea of hourly associates, like brand new first job. Maybe we're talking like high school type person. So maybe it's not like, oh my gosh, I'm upheaving my whole life to make this
Yep.
change, this big deal. Because the reality is most hourly employees will leave, right?
Hmm.
And so, but what if, like you talked about, they're usually treated as endings, inevitable, transactional, unavoidable, impersonal, right? Fast. But what if it was actually the first chance to re-recruit someone who you've already invested in?
Hmm.
And I think that's kind of where I think we both want to take this conversation is why we talk endlessly about why people leave. um, but it's not always a good leave. There's a bad leave, right? Like good people leave companies for reasons other than, I hate it here. This place sucks. My manager's the worst. Maybe they're just going back to school. Maybe they're moving.
Hmm.
So, what can companies do in various scenarios to make that person want to come back? How do you leave the door open and make what's on this side of the door seem enticing enough to feel like, yeah, I could see myself there again?
I mean, I think a lot of it is training managers
Mm.
to take their ego out of resignations. Because it isn't always about us. And I think I've used him as an example before. But Jake, who's still at Starbucks, anyone looking to go work for someone great, go work there. For Jake specifically, when I told Jake I was leaving, he was about to give me my yearly review, by the way, and I cut him off because I basically was like, I am not going to make this man sit through this review and then tell him because that's terrible. So I pulled him outside, and he probably knew immediately when I was like, "Can we take a step outside the store?" And I looked at him and I was like, listen, like, you're great, but like, this just isn't for me. My journey at Starbucks has come to an end. And Jake looked at me, and the first thing he said to me, and I've told so many people this because it meant so much. He looks at me and goes, "Do you need a reference?" That was his first thought, which says a lot about him as a leader, as a person, as a man.
Mhm.
And then, I said, he asked me where I was going. I told him, and he said, is that what's best for you? And I go, yes. And he was like, that's awesome. And while I don't necessarily think I'll ever go back to Starbucks, but that door is open. I don't feel like I can't go back or that door is permanently closed and bolted shut. Okay, that's like someplace I could maybe go. And I feel like I was respected in the end process. When I was at Old Navy, my district manager, Jenna, the last time I saw her, like in my 2 week notice period, was actually at an overnight inventory and at a different store because I was like the inventory like captain for the district. And so I was doing another store's inventory, helping facilitate it. And she handed me like a card, like a Hallmark type card. And she said, do not open this until you get home. And I was like, okay. Only time someone's like letter to me made like from a work thing made me cry. Because I still have it. It's in my hope chest actually at home. Um, and because it wasn't like even though clearly I was highly thought of by her in so many ways. I was a new manager trainer. She put me in charge of inventory. She could have really been mad that I was leaving. She could have been like, this really screws me over. Now who's going to do this? Now I have to rethink this. Instead, that letter was basically like, because she came in, she didn't hire me. She came in when I was already at Old Navy. And she's like, you were so crucial to like welcoming me into the district and like being open to a new leader. Like it was a very beautifully written letter. It was all about like her loving the way I led my team. Like, it was nothing about anything bad. And again, door open. Also, that was my second time working at Old Navy.
Mhm.
Um, I worked at Old Navy as my first retail job ever as a shipment sales associate. And then I got promoted to key holder. And then I was young and like that job like stressed me out. Like I was like, what do you mean we have to stay till 2 a.m. to prep for visits? This doesn't make sense. And I left. Um, and then, a little over a decade later, when I had store manager experience, I ended up coming back to Old Navy. And that's where I learned too that Old Navy had their own little term for it called boomerangs, because there were quite a few people within the Old Navy universe who would leave and come back. And actually, Old Navy kind of acted when some people left, they kind of acted like, well, we'll see him again. Like, and I think it wasn't, some of it was a little bit of an ego in terms of Old Navy's culture, but some of it was also that like Old Navy at the time was so sure that it treated people well and that they were among the best employers that they kind of had this attitude of like, sure, you can go explore, see what's out there, but we'll be here. We know you're coming back. Which I thought was actually like a really cool attitude to have because it was like almost like a joke in the company. Because my assistant general manager at the time, Nick, had been with the company for when I was there 20 years by that point.
Mhm.
And then at one point he was like, well, technically I'm kind of a boomerang. And I'm like, what? What do you mean? You've been here for 20 years. He goes, well, I left for like 5 months. He
Yeah.
went somewhere after like 12 years somewhere, was there for like half a year, and then was like, what is this? And then came back to Old Navy. So I think, again, having that door open, it also just, even if you never come back, you're always going to remember how someone treated you as you walked away.
Yeah. Yeah. A well handled exit can turn a departing employee into, for sure, a future rehire, but also a brand advocate or a great talent referral source
Hmm.
if it goes well. So I would love to dig into your Old Navy experience. When you first, for one, I feel like how old were you when you left the first time?
Uh, uh, 20? Yeah, 20.
So for what it's worth, I feel like 20-year-old you was correct. It is insane to stay till 2 a.m. for a store visit. We've talked about that, right? We talked about like how, before you get into the thick of retail, how common sense stuff is still
Hmm.
commonsensical in your mind. And then you learn it's normal. Normal, air quotes normal. But what was it like when you left?
Well, here's the thing. I left, now it's just going to sound like I have a history of leaving great leaders. Um, but because again, separate episode, but I will die on the hill that, uh, people don't always leave bad leaders.
Yeah.
I have left many a bad system and some great leaders. Um, so Denise was my second manager at Old Navy because that's the habit I have. Someone hires me, and then the person who hires me leaves. I am cursed in that way. Um, and so I got a new manager, Denise, and she was amazing. She was who I actually model myself after now.
Mhm.
I look back so fondly at like everything she taught me about leadership. She was so like real and just herself, and there wasn't like this weird guarding or boundary around her like I am the manager so I cannot like talk to you in a certain way or like, whatever. And she hustled and she cared about us. And like all our little quirks, she just like accepted. But it was the staying to 2 a.m. And we already know this about me, quite philosophical. It was like 1 in the morning. And I remember looking it around and everyone like stressed and like on their like third Red Bull. And I think I had been there from since like 6 a.m., just so we're clear. And so I remember just having this moment, like looking around and being like, this is kind of messed up. Like, and so I gave my notice to Denise that night at
Wow.
1:45 a.m. I gave her 2 weeks. By the way, I had no job. Um, I gave her the notice, and while it was sort of impulsive, it was also just like this isn't what I want to be doing. Like, not retail necessarily, but like this level over shirts. Like, I still look back on it, and like, while some people, I've told this story too, and it's kind of a Rorschach test in some ways. Like, because sometimes people are like, that was an impulsive decision you made, like that, you're poor manager. And I'm like, you don't think like the cultural piece of like all of us sweating out Red Bull from our pores at 2 a.m. is the real problem? Anyway, so I gave my notice late, and Denise kind of looked at me like, I get it. Like, here we are. It's like 2 in the morning. She had also been there since 6 a.m., just so we're clear. So she was not one, it's not like she gave herself a princess shift. And so she responded kindly. And then the next, after the visit, so like the visit happens, and then the following day that we worked together after that, she basically double checked with me. Are you sure?
Mm-hmm.
Like, was that a 2 a.m. decision, or is this something you're really sure of? And I was like, I basically said the same thing to her that I said to Jake and Jenna. I love you, but I love myself more, and I gotta go.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, and then we remained friendly. And then actually, how many years went by? 8 years. And then we ended up working on the same street in Boston, her being a general manager for like a Zara, and me at a British company. And I walked in, and it was great. Like, we had a great little moment. And yeah, I think that's the way you treat people who leave.
Yeah. I have a slightly tangential question.
Hmm.
If you were there at 2 a.m., you and your team sweating, doing all, let's say it was for a Black Friday sale,
Hmm.
would you have also left? Or was it the idea that you were doing all of this for an executive to come walk your store?
It was the idea that we were doing it for an executive. I actually think it's funny that you asked that, because I don't know that I'd ever thought of that. Once again, you are the queen of great questions. Because I think if it was for a customer, if it was for a business, I actually don't think I'd be bothered at all.
Right.
Because it's not for show. And I think what really made the decision stick was actually seeing how the visit went and being like, we did all of that just for you to, one, be here for 20 minutes, and two, still be kind of unhappy about certain aspects of the store.
Yeah.
And that when she had asked me, I was like, oh no, I'm good. Because for me, and again, I'm always going to take it to a philosophical place of like, I mean, again, if we're not doing something, I was actually saying this to an employee of mine recently. If it's not for the employees, and if it's not for the customers, and it's not for the business, then I don't think it's important, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like, and nowhere on that list is executives. There's nothing, because if executives want something that doesn't relate to one of those three things, they want it for their ego, to feel important, to express their power, but it has nothing to do with money or service. It has to do with them. And I think that they should seek therapy.
Love it. Agreed. Glad we went there. Okay, so did you get an exit interview?
Where?
First time.
The first
at
time.
Old Navy, the first time you left.
No, I did not.
Okay. What was it like to come back? Were you, general anecdotes, whatever you have, but also specifics, like, were you already in their system? Did they know you were returning? Did it feel like you were brand new?
It's interesting. They didn't really, I don't know that I really brought it up during my interview process. So I don't think that they knew. And I think enough time went by that like no one was digging in to see that. I think the only thing they saw is like, I think HR looked to make sure I was like rehireable. I didn't have that big red box that was like, do not rehire.
Right.
I did have the same number though when I came back.
Like employee number?
Yeah. Because like So a couple of companies I've worked for do this. They retire employee numbers. Like it's always your number. Because they just keep going up in numbers. And so I remember restarting, and the person who trained me was like, "Oh my God, you have an older number than I do." And I've been here for like 10 years. And I was like, "Well, because I used to work here before." And what's funny is I can't remember it now, but she was like, "It's 183." And then I remembered the rest of it. Like it like came back into my brain. And I was like, where was I storing that information?
Cool.
Um, and so it definitely was. I mean, part of the reason I even returned is because my logic was also that while my experience with that visit wasn't great, a company who hired Denise, who would allow a leader not only to be the way she was, but also be successful because she ended up like moving to a bigger store, a new store. Like she had a lot of success there. So I was like, any company that appreciates her is the kind of company I want to work for. So that's kind of like what led me back. And then, yeah. And then when I was in like, sort of like training and then onboarding and like just like getting into the brand or re-getting into the brand, there was a lot of jokes about like, and this is Matt. He's like going to be this general manager for this store. He's a boomerang. Like it was like it was made to be like a whole thing, like welcome home. So yeah, that part was nice.
Interesting. Okay, so you did have some kind of record, but it's not like you got some sort of fast track or preferential treatment when you applied for this role.
No, I think too much time had gone by for it to really matter as much. Plus, it was such a different position. It's not like I was like a GM and then coming back as a GM 3 years later or something.
Gotcha. And so what was in a nutshell the what happened in that gap that led you back there? I know, you talked about how appreciating that they seem to value the kind of leadership that you also valued was a reason for feeling able to come back. But what happened in the meantime?
So, in my journey of like becoming a store leader and then being one for quite a few years up until that point,
Mhm.
I also, right before Old Navy, you can peep my LinkedIn if you want to know the name of the brand. Um, I had the worst experience of my career in terms of like leadership and culture. And so I really kind of hit this moment of pause of like, okay, what am I looking for? And we were just talking about this before we hit record, but I had read Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek and kind of was like reading that and was like, yeah, this is the way. I understand that this is the way. What brands do I know of that also know that this is the way? And while Old Navy wasn't, I'll be honest, it wasn't top of mind. It didn't immediately come to my brain. What ended up happening was a recruiter. So at the company I was at, the DM moved on, and a recruiter reached out to that district manager to be like, "Is there anyone at the company you just left I can go poach?" And she gave them my name, and that recruiter then reached out to me. That recruiter, Taman Castellano, she is the director of recruiting for Victoria's Secret right now. And I just have to shout out because I don't know that I've done it on the pod. Um, she is the best recruiter in the industry. She is the standard. She is the way. Um, can't say enough good things. She reached out to me and was like, "Hey, got your name. Are you interested?" And then as I went through the interview process, I kind of decided to be like really forthcoming about what I wanted out of culture in those interviews. And one of the things I said to my DM that ended up hiring me was, I have a list of priorities. They go in this order. And if this sounds good, I'd love to work here. And if you hate the sound of this, then, it's just not meant to be, and that's okay too. And I said, the order of operations for my priorities are my employees come first, and then my customers, and then my boss. In that order, never to be changed. And it said a lot about Old Navy that she not only didn't blink of an eye, she looked at me like, and what other order would there be? And so like that's kind of what like led me back to Old Navy was that culture that they in that time not only had they stuck true to the employee, but they had like even gotten better in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like we could almost expand what our definition of retention, because like retention doesn't have to mean right now until forever.
Hmm.
It could mean leaving the door open for them to come back. So let's go through a couple of common examples of what that might look like. And
Hmm.
I touched on this when we first started this episode. So, like high school, wrapping up high school, maybe that's something you did as a part time job in high school. You worked at the store, and now you're going to college because you want to be a accountant or a lawyer or work in HR or marketing, graphic design, whatever thing. I've never seen in the retailers that I've worked with, I've never seen very obvious paths or lines being drawn to tell those people you can do that here. And because you've worked in the store, you're especially valuable to us. So let us
Hmm.
know. Like, what do you want to do? And let us know. Have you seen anything like that?
No.
Yeah.
Um, I'm, I say, I'm, there's a lot going through my brain that I'm trying not to vomit into the microphone, but, and I said this on an episode before, and I think it bears repeating. Like, I think a lot of that, again, to be dealt with in its own episode,
Mhm.
is really just like this weird class based viewpoint that like hourly or like field employees, brick and mortar employees, whatever you want to call them, are separate from the corporate entity. And like select few will cross that threshold. And I think if I'm being really critical and maybe conspirational a little bit, I think that some companies don't really want someone who's worked in the store to be in those spaces where they could tell people what really goes on in a store. I think some companies don't want to know. I'm not saying that's all companies, but I think there are enough that don't want that threshold to be crossed because they don't want someone to be like, so we can't do that because like in a store that won't work. Let me tell you, they don't want to know. It's easier just to like operate without knowing.
Yeesh.
It had to be said.
There's my client base. Because you're gonna know. That's really interesting. So is your belief that they don't want to know because it'll make their job harder because they don't want to admit that they're potentially wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll use Old Navy as an example. Like Old Navy, when we went to store leadership conferences, it wasn't just the CEO speaking and the VP speaking. It was also that we got to interact. And I may have mentioned this before, but maybe not on the episode. But like they had this thing called booth camp where you could go to different booths,
Yeah.
and it would be IT and HR, visual merchandising, online returns, Omni, DEI. Literally everyone had a booth. If you can think of a corporate function, they had a booth, and there was no walls. You could just walk up to any booth. It wasn't timed. It wasn't like, and then you go to this booth and they give you this spiel. You could literally walk up to someone in online returns and be like, "What gives? Why am I doing returns like this?" And that person would be like, because they were so nerdy and excited about what they were doing, whatever their function was, that they would be like, let me tell you about what we're working on. So we're working on a system. And then you would get this transparency, but also there was just no like invisible wall that you weren't supposed to cross. So I think that like in a company like that, yeah, they're not scared for someone in a store to come into one of those functions because they're already listening. They're already providing that like free flow of communication back and forth. But there are a lot of companies where like you can never get FaceTime with, you have to go through your DM, who goes through the regional, who goes through the VP, who then trickles it to the say VP of ops, who trickles it back down to the director of Omni, who trickles it down to the manager of online returns. And it has to go up, across, and then back down.
Yeah.
If that's the way communication happens in a company, I would argue that they have no interest in someone from stores just plopping themselves into, say, going to school for computer science or data science or whatever, and then ending up in that omni function
Yeah.
because they clearly don't even want the truth or direct communication now. They definitely don't want it sitting in their cubicle with them.
Because they say they do. They say they want it.
Hmm.
You know,
And I say I want to stop eating sugar, but this morning I had a cinnamon bun. So you know what? We all lie to ourselves in small and big ways.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and to your point, like again, it always comes back to me for the employee engagement survey. That's how they think that they're
Hmm.
hearing from stores. But we have plenty of episodes where we talk about how bloated and convoluted that system is. All right. Well, then let me ask you, as a store manager, when you have an hourly employee leave, what does that look like for you? And let's just assume, for brevity's sake, this is this is someone you like. This is someone who's been there for, let's say, a year or two at least. Um, Good person. What's your response?
My first question, it is literally, I've like trained myself to always ask one question first, which is this decision the best decision for you? Um, and most of the time, because I feel like I do engagement for the most part, well, um, it always is right for them because I've treated them well. They've gotten the schedule mostly the way they want it to the best of my ability. And they really are leaving because there is an opportunity I cannot provide them, money I can't provide them, or they're relocating, or they're going back to school. It's something completely out of my realm of control. Because most people know, not everyone, but most people who've worked for me know that if it is in my realm of control, even if it's like slightly outside, I will try and make magic happen. So my question is always like, is it the right move, or is it the best for you, or is this better for you? Whatever version of that question stumbles out of my mouth. And then we usually chat, like have a little conversation. They're always nervous. I wish I could rid people of that nervousness. Because I've never been upset ever at someone's leaving. And I think sometimes people are like, at first they feel like almost sad that I'm not upset. Like some people, definitely want you to miss them. And, I always have to explain to people like, I'm going to miss you, but I also like, I don't want your last weeks with us to be sad or bitter. And I also think that models for the rest of my team how to treat that person. And then I probably go over the top a little bit with this, but let's say they're leaving for another retailer. But it's like a position I can't offer, or it's more money or whatever. I will openly talk on the floor with that employee in front of other employees intentionally
Mhm.
to be like, and what are you excited about? When do you start? Do you know what training looks like? Because I want everyone else to know this is how we treat someone who's leaving. We get curious. We are still excited for them. Because if this wasn't them leaving, if they were like, I'm going on vacation to Bermuda, we would ask all sorts of nosy ass questions about what they're doing and what they're excited about. And this should be the exact same. And so I always try to make it clear to people that, it's not goodbye forever. And also, if anyone has ever worked for me, they also know that it's not goodbye forever. I mean, I worked with people, yikes, 14 years ago who I still talk to occasionally, or someone recently I went to coffee with a couple months ago who I hired them when they were in high school, um, 14 years ago. They are now a full married adult. And so, yikes. But it's like also employees know that about me. So they're like, oh, this isn't like I can't ever reach out, or,
Yeah.
this is goodbye to the company forever, can't come back. And I think that that's really important standard to set because I also don't want a team. I think as a manager, it's really important that you're not modeling for your team. And now we're going to like give this person the silent treatment, or be angry because let's be real. If I work somewhere where I could get them a promotion, but for whatever reason that company is like they can't get a promotion for 12 months. Like, the system that we're in, it takes this amount of time and you have to go through these steps. And they found somewhere else they can get that pay, that position faster. I'm that's I'm happy for you. Great. You hacked life. That's what you gotta do. So I think it's really important to model for employees like this is how we treat people who are leaving.
Yeah. Have you had boomerangs?
So not someone who worked for me and then worked for me again necessarily, but I've had people come back who've worked for a brand before and then I've rehired. In fact, I have one right now as we speak.
Hmm. As we're talking and as you're talking about, your Jake and your Jenna and your Denise,
Yeah.
it's occurring to me that people can boomerang brands but people probably also boomerang leaders.
Oh,
Like
for sure.
like even if they've gone to a different brand.
I mean, I've never done that. Because unfortunately for me, not for them, but for me and my own selfish wants, none of the great people who I have loved the most have ever landed somewhere that I'm like, oh my God, yes. Like, they're doing what's best for them, which is what they should do.
Yeah.
But there are people, Jenna in particular, like if she ever landed somewhere that I really wanted to be,
Mhm.
I would drop everything right now and go.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about then what specifically some approachable action steps that companies could do to build a boomerang path that most
Hmm.
of them aren't doing now. For one, just logistically, I feel like keeping records open for people who left in good standing,
Hmm.
right? Like, so not feeling like I am brand new, if especially if I've had some kind of tenure with that company.
Hmm.
Is that a thing? Does that happen? Do you like? Is that common practice?
Again, because of the lawyers,
Yeah.
there's a lot that I think companies force people to do again, regardless. Like, so for example, at Starbucks, if a barista leaves,
Mhm.
there's informal rules. I don't know that there's a real rule because I heard so many like different sort of rumors if they leave and come back within a certain amount of time, I had heard like, oh, I just kind of like fast track their barista training, refresh them, whatever.
Mhm.
But the system itself does actually make them go through every single module again. I think it was just different leaders took it upon themselves to be like, well, you remember how to make a caramel macchiato. So let's just like skip that part and move to the new drinks or the things that have changed since you've left.
Yeah.
And I think so for me, I do something similar. Like right now, I have someone who worked for the brand I work for, and she left almost 4 years ago. But a lot of the product is the same. So it kind of was us working together. Like, what do you need a refresher on? What do you remember? And like, let me quiz that almost to see like if it's accurate and whatever. And here's what's definitely changed. Here's what I know, like policy procedure wise, has definitely changed since you've last been here. But I don't think any company has a formal pathway or easement that allows people to just kind of like come back. It's more of an informal manager by manager, case by case. Like, okay, well, come back, but here's how you do it.
And I could see the challenge. Obviously, if somebody's leaving, they have to be replaced, right? Like you have
Hmm.
to have workers in your store.
Yeah.
And so I get that that creates complications too, because it can't just be like, hey, if you hate it, come back, because that position
Yeah.
is filled. But it would be neat if there were some kind of re-entry trial period, especially if you're somewhere where people boomerang and you're
Hmm.
pretty confident that it's better where you are than where they're going. It's a neat concept to think of. That's like, hey,
Hmm.
if this doesn't go well, we love you. We would love you to come home. Um, Let us know if it doesn't work out, and if we don't have something right away, we'll just keep an eye out.
And I think that's kind of like there was no formal way at Old Navy for that, but
Hmm.
I think that that was like the vibe of the culture was like I mean, we have they have 1,100 stores or something like that in the US. So I think for them it was less about like we don't need to like necessarily have a same position for you, like in the same store, same position but different store. Like we have other stores. So if you leave as a general manager and in 5 months you want to come back, there's probably going to be an opening somewhere.
Yeah.
And we'll squeeze you back in. And I think that was kind of the vibe they tried to build.
Right.
But again, no formal way to do that.
And not even like a communication, like is there such thing as a alumni newsletter?
Not at some company. So Starbucks has an informal one.
What do you mean
Um,
informal? Who's doing it?
I don't know. I think it's run by former partners, as they're called. There's like a whole LinkedIn group.
Huh, interesting.
Because Starbucks used to have, I don't know if they still do this, but they used to have like sort of like a motto inside of like, once a partner, always a partner. And so they have that sort of culturally because they also have a lot of people who have boomeranged back and forth. Some people like 5 times, like no lie. Um, I didn't have any in my store, but I had met people who were like, and then I left for a year and then I came back and then I left and then I came back as something different.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. So if we could kind of wrap up what we've been chatting about, if you have final thoughts on what companies could do differently that typically they're not doing now to invite the many, many people who are leaving. We talk about turnover endlessly to come back either to the same role, a lateral role, a promotion. How would you summarize that?
I would say the first step is how you treat them as they leave is the implicit invitation back. So really training leaders and creating a culture where like it's not a resignation or someone giving their notice should actually be quite boring. Especially to your point, it's happening so frequently. Why are you letting yourself get elevated over it? And I also think this is so cheesy, but that like saying of like if you love something, like let it go kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think if you create a culture where people are like sort of feel free to leave, where it's not a big deal, it's not treated as like being disloyal or like forsaking the culture, which is like how a lot of people do treat it. I also think your employees, because they feel freer to leave, that doesn't become part of the calculation as they're thinking about the things they don't like culturally. Because if you make people feel like, are you about to leave? Are you going to be disloyal? Are you going to be like Heather? Because Heather left. Are you going to leave? Like,
Mm.
if you act like that, people are more likely, funny enough, to be like, yeah, I think I am going to leave this crazy world we're in. Whereas if you're like, and we're happy for Heather, Heather's going to do great things where she's going, then people kind of have a little bit of a pause and be like, do I want to leave a place that's this pro my life? And so to answer your question more directly, I think the first thing companies need to do is have formal trainings around how to respond to people leaving.
Have you ever had that?
No.
It's your chance. Matt's new course. Although I don't think people leave you frequently enough. Yeah, yeah. So it really comes down. What you're saying is it comes down to the manager.
It does. And I think, but a company creates that
Yeah.
ability because I think there's been places I've worked where someone has left working for me and I've responded fine. And then I tell my DM and they're like, well, where are they going? Are they getting paid more? What are they do? And I'm like, bro, calm down.
Yeah.
I'm not upset about them leaving. Like, it's best for them. Stop acting like we're the only people on the planet that hire people and treat them well, because we're not. And so I think it is, cultural, because the only reason I was able to handle that is because I, quite frankly, don't often care what DMs think of what happens on my team. That's not your concern. So But I think some people feel that pressure and they're like, okay, I'll go back and talk to her and see if there's anything we can offer. Or, yeah, okay. And then they go back to the person and they're like, so I talked to Jim and Jim wanted me to tell you that there might be an opening in the other store. And like, you don't really know how they're going to treat you over there. And we've treated you so well. Like, it's like you're like a captor. Um,
Mhm.
like you're in a basement and I'm trying to convince you to stay in the basement with us. You don't want to be free. You want to be here. It's giving desperate. And so yeah, I think it can be top down as well. It's not just the manager. There is like cultures where again, leaving is, there was someone at Old Navy that when I left, basically one person, it wasn't the culture, it was just him. Um who basically didn't speak to me and was like angry that I was leaving. And anecdotally, I want to say I've had that happen once before, and of course it was a man. That's where we're going. And it was when I left Pete's Coffee, and I was going to a brand that he had never heard of. It was called Hotel Chocolat. It was a British chocolate company that also is a cafe. And when I was leaving, he was like, I've never even heard of that company. And I had just been promoted to a higher, not just, but I was promoted to a higher volume Pete's, the highest volume at the time on the East Coast. And he basically was like, but what do you mean? Like, you could be a DM. And I will never forget that conversation because it was everything I hate about leadership. It was the convincing me that I was actually making the wrong decision for my career. It was the fact that he was acting like the only career path forward was there. And I remember I said to him, and sometimes I really wish that I was as ballsy as my early 20s self. Because I remember looking at him and being like, I could go work on the shipment team. I said this to him verbatim, on the shipment team at Walmart tomorrow, and I would run that store in 2 years. So I am not worried about my career, although I appreciate that you are. And because I was so angry that he was like trying to convince me of something that I knew was right for me. And you know what? What's funny is that company ended up closing its US stores 2 years later. I got to go to London 3 times. I got to learn a lot about working very remotely from your leadership. And then that took me to one of the best jobs of my career, working at a local coffee company right after that and running multiple stores. So, like, it was not the wrong decision for my career. It was actually the perfectly right one. And although Pete's isn't like tainted in my heart because I will always love it, actually, that same manager is somewhere else locally and I can't even go there as a customer. And that might sound really petty and bitter, but any place that would think that he has something to offer in terms of leadership is not a place that I'm going to give even a dollar to.
I mean, just to perfectly illustrate the point that you made at the top of the episode, where it's like, retain your customer
Hmm.
with your exit experience as well. Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is you can't, if someone has come to you to give notice, if they say they're leaving, you can't or shouldn't convince them that they're wrong. It's probably something they've given some thought to. What you
Hmm.
can do is let them find out if it
Hmm.
is wrong and make it inviting for them to come back. But
Yeah,
you can't, like, once someone gets something like that in their head, they have to find out.
exactly. And we have to respect that people know what's best for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, in summary, turnover is inevitable to some degree. I mean, absolutely, there are a number of things that companies can do, especially in retail, to slow the bleeding and to reduce the amount of unnecessary turnover. But a real differentiator is how you end things. Like
Hmm.
every retailer, every store is going to lose people, but how you do that is potentially your first opportunity to re-recruit that person or have a great talent referral source.
Hmm.
So it's a real fork in the road. You can be bitter and treat them like they were just a body instead of hands, and let them be ghosts in the wind, or you could invite them to Boomerang and come back and make reentry feel like coming home, not a punishment, not like you're coming back with your tail between your legs, not like you're silly for having done what you chose to do.
Hmm.
And it sounds like every manager, but also with the support of the company, gets to decide which path they take. Any final thoughts?
No, I think that's a perfect summary. I think everyone should rewind 2 minutes and listen to that again.
Love it. I love when it happens. Amazing. All right. Thanks as always, Matt.
Thank you.
You're listening to Dear Corporate, Love Stores.